The first thing I learned about fear was that it does not always scream. Sometimes, it sits across from you in a corner booth, smiles at the waitress, and keeps one hand wrapped around your wrist under the table. I was 20 years old, wearing a faded blue diner uniform, a red apron tied at my waist, and shoes with holes near the toes, trying to pretend my life was normal while the midnight rain slid down the windows of Rosalie's like the whole city was crying quietly. My long blonde hair was tied back so tightly it pulled at my scalp, because loose hair was one more thing people noticed, and I had learned to survive by becoming less noticeable. The man beside me kept talking in that soft, careful voice people used when they wanted strangers to think everything was fine. To anyone watching, I probably looked like a nervous, chubby girl on a bad date, pale face, trembling hands, eyes too tired for my age. But I was not on a date. I was trying to survive until the front door opened again. Evan Hale had picked me up after my shift, though pick me up was not the right phrase. He had waited outside the back door of the diner in his clean gray car with the engine running and the passenger door unlocked, like he had already decided I would get in. I told him I was tired. He said tired girls made bad decisions. I told him I had an early class at community college. He said school had made me arrogant. Then he smiled at Rosalie, my manager, through the glass and waved like he was the kind of man mothers trusted. That was how he moved through the world. Soft voice, clean shoes, hands that only changed when nobody important was looking. 2 hours later, he had brought me back inside the same diner where I worked, ordered coffee I did not want, and kept explaining why I should be grateful he cared enough to correct me. My phone was face down beside my plate. My tips were still folded in the pocket of my red apron. My left wrist rested under the table, trapped beneath his fingers. The whole room smelled like burnt coffee, wet coats, and fried onions. The clock above the register clicked toward midnight. I watched the second hand move because it gave me something to believe in. 1 second, then another. Proof that nothing, not even fear, stayed still forever. The waitress on duty that night was Marcy, 46, kind, exhausted, with a pencil tucked behind one ear and a rule about never asking questions she could not afford to answer. She passed our booth twice, slowing just enough to notice my untouched coffee, my stiff shoulders, and the way Evan's smile followed her like a warning. I wanted to tell her. I wanted to stand up and walk to the counter. I wanted to be the kind of girl who made a scene. But my throat felt packed with wet cotton. Evan leaned closer, his voice gentle enough to make anyone listening think he was comforting me. You understand why I worry, Lily. A girl like you does not always know what is best for herself. A girl like me. I hated those 4 words more than I hated the rain. They meant soft, too trusting, too round, too ordinary, too easy to overlook. My mother used to say people underestimated quiet girls because quiet looked like empty space to them. They never understood how much we were holding. Then the bell above Rosalie's door rang. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a small metallic sound cutting through the storm and the clatter of dishes. But the room changed. It was instant. The cook stopped scraping the grill. Marcy's hand froze around the coffee pot. 2 men near the counter lowered their eyes to their plates. Even the rain seemed to press harder against the glass, as if trying to get inside and watch. Then he walked in. Dominic Valenti. Everyone in Chicago knew his name, even people who pretended they did not. 6 feet 3 inches tall, black coat damp from the rain, white skin marked by dark tattoos climbing his neck and disappearing beneath his cuffs, his face hard enough to make conversations die before he reached the counter. He looked dangerous in the way winter looked dangerous, silent, clean, and unforgiving. His dark hair was slicked back from his forehead, and a thin scar near his jaw caught the neon light for half a second before disappearing into shadow. Men like Evan performed power. Dominic carried it like gravity. He did not need to raise his voice. He did not need to look around and announce himself. The city seemed to recognize him before anyone did. I should have looked away. Every instinct told me to lower my eyes, to become small, to survive the way I had survived so many rooms. Instead, I remembered my mother's hands. Grace Parker had small hands, always cold, always moving, folding napkins, counting quarters, smoothing my hair before school, touching 2 fingers to her collarbone when she heard footsteps outside our apartment that made her go still. She had taught me the signal when I was 11, standing beside the kitchen sink while rain tapped the fire escape. 2 fingers here means I need help, she said, pressing my hand to my own collarbone. Not a wave, not a scream, a signal. Then she took a sugar packet from the coffee can she kept for guests we never had and turned it upside down on the table. This means I cannot speak freely. If someone ever understands both, you trust them long enough to reach a door. I had asked her who would understand something so strange. She only looked out the window and said, someone who has needed it. Now, in Rosalie's, with Evan's fingers tied around my wrist and Dominic Valeni standing 30 feet away beneath the bleeding red glow of the diner's sign. That memory rose inside me like a match in a dark room. I lifted my right hand from the coffee cup. My fingers shook so badly, I almost knocked the spoon onto the floor. I touched 2 fingers to my collarbone. Then, with my other hand, I turned the sugar packet upside down beside my plate. It looked stupid, tiny, childish. A little white rectangle on a laminate table. But it was the bravest thing I had done in months. Dominic stopped moving. His eyes found mine across cheap tile and neon light. Not my mouth. Not my body. My hand. The sugar. My face. For one breath, the whole diner went still. Then he smiled, not warmly, not kindly, but like he had just understood everything. And somehow, I knew my life had split in two. Dominic did not rush toward me. That was what made him terrifying. He moved slowly, removing his black gloves finger by finger, while every person in Rosalie's pretended not to stare. Evan noticed the change in the air and tightened his smile. I felt his hand close harder around my wrist beneath the table, not enough for anyone else to see, just enough to remind me I was supposed to stay quiet. My coffee had gone cold 10 minutes ago, but steam still rose from Dominic's cup when Marcy poured it for him at the counter. Her hands trembled so much the coffee almost spilled over the rim. He did not look at her. He looked at the sugar packet beside my plate, upside down like a tiny white flag no one else understood. He took one sip of coffee, set the mug down, then stood. The diner bell gave a soft metallic shake as wind pushed against the front door. My heart beat so hard I could hear it in my ears. He stopped beside our booth and looked at Evan as if he were reading a receipt. "Is this seat taken?" Dominic asked. Evan laughed too quickly. "We are in the middle of something." Dominic's eyes lowered to the hand hidden under the table. Then his face changed. Not loud, not angry, just colder. "Let her go." 2 simple words. The kind that did not need to be repeated. The grip vanished from my wrist. I pulled my hand back against my chest, hiding the red marks with my sleeve. Dominic looked at me then, and for the first time that night, I felt seen instead of watched. Evan stood too fast, scraping the booth against the tile with a sound that made everyone flinch. His name was Evan, though I had stopped thinking of him as a person somewhere between the first threat and the second hour of pretending. He lifted both hands like this was all a misunderstanding, like Dominic had walked into the middle of a private conversation instead of a quiet emergency. "She is fine," Evan said. "Ask her yourself." The whole diner seemed to lean toward me. The cook stopped behind the pass window. Marcy froze with a coffee pot in her hand. Rain tapped the glass harder, steady as a warning. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. My throat locked around the truth. Evan smiled because he knew it would. Dominic did not look disappointed. He looked prepared. He slid into the booth beside me, close enough that the sharp scent of rain, cedar, and expensive wool surrounded me, but not close enough to trap me. That mattered. I noticed it before I noticed anything else. He placed his tattooed hand flat on the table, palm down, still as stone. "You do not have to answer him," he said. "You only have to answer me." I stared at his knuckles, at the ink running under his cuffs, at the dark lines disappearing beneath his collar. His face was brutal in the neon light, all hard angles and controlled silence, but his voice was lower than I expected. Gentle, almost. "Did you make that signal on purpose?" My eyes burned. I nodded once. Evan's smile vanished. Dominic turned his head slightly, and 2 men near the back door stood at the same time. They did not touch anyone. They did not need to. Evan stepped backward, suddenly pale. Dominic kept his eyes on me. "Then you are leaving with me," he said. "Not because I own you. Because tonight, I am the only man in this room who understands what you just asked for." The words should have made me move. They should have pulled me out of the booth like a rope thrown into dark water. Instead, I sat frozen with my palm pressed to my wrist, feeling my own pulse jump under the skin. Leaving sounded simple when people said it from the outside. Just leave him. Just walk away. Just block his number. Nobody talked about how fear trained your body before your mind could catch up. Nobody talked about how your legs forgot they belonged to you after months of being told every step would cost you something. Evan looked around the diner, searching for an audience that would make him look reasonable again. Lily, he said, softening my name until it sounded like a warning wrapped in velvet. You are tired. You are confused. This man is dangerous. Dominic did not blink. I am, he said. Evan's mouth opened, then closed. Dominic leaned back in the booth, not relaxed, never relaxed, but patient in a way that made the room feel smaller. The difference is that I am telling her the truth. Marcy moved then. It was almost nothing. A step from behind the counter. A hand pressing against the edge of her apron. Her eyes met mine for the first time all night, and there was shame there, but also fear. I understood both. Evan had been charming to everyone for months. He had brought flowers once. He had tipped well. He had waited at the counter with that patient smile and asked if Lily was almost done, like he was a boyfriend from a movie and not a lock pretending to be a key. Dominic noticed Marcy's movement. Of course he did. He seemed to notice everything. He picked up the upside-down sugar packet, turned it between two fingers, then set it back exactly as it had been. Who taught you? He asked me. My mother. Her name? My mouth went dry. Grace Parker. The name landed between us like a glass dropped in an empty church. For half a second, Dominic's face lost its armor. It was not much. A flicker near the eyes. A stillness in his jaw. But I saw it. Evan saw it too, and his fear sharpened into calculation. You know her? He asked, trying to turn the moment into something he could use. Dominic ignored him. His gaze stayed on me, and something old moved behind it, something that did not belong to this diner or this storm. Grace Parker, he repeated quietly. Then he reached into the inside pocket of his coat and placed a folded $50 bill under his untouched coffee cup. Marcy, he said without looking away from me, call a cab for Mr. Hale. Evan stiffened. I have my car. Not tonight. You cannot do that. Dominic finally turned his head toward him. I can do many things. I am choosing the polite one. Nobody spoke. The neon sign hummed. Rain ran down the window in crooked lines. Evan looked at the two men near the back door, then at Dominic, then at me. His eyes had changed. The softness was gone. What replaced it was the private version of him, the one I knew too well. You will regret embarrassing me, Lily. He said it softly, so softly that only our booth could hear. But Dominic heard. His tattooed fingers curled once against the table, then flattened again. No violence. No shouting. Just control. That control frightened Evan more than any threat could have. Dominic stood and offered me his hand, palm up, not grabbing, not demanding. I stared at it. His hand was large, inked, scarred across one knuckle, a hand that had probably signed things and broken things and held secrets heavy enough to sink a city. I did not take it. Not because I refused him, because I needed to stand by myself. Dominic understood that too. He lowered his hand without offense and stepped back, giving me room. My knees shook when I slid out of the booth. The diner floor felt uneven beneath my cheap shoes. I took one step, then another, past the counter, past Marcy's trembling coffee pot, past the cook who looked away as if my courage embarrassed him. At the door, I glanced back. Evan stood alone beside the booth, his face clean, his coat dry, his whole life still shaped like a man who could explain himself out of consequences. But the sugar packet remained upside down on the table between us, and for the first time, the room knew what it meant. The bell above Rosalie's door trembled when Dominic opened it for me, and the sound followed us into the rain like a small, frightened prayer. Outside, Chicago had turned silver and black. Streetlights blurred across the wet pavement. Cars hissed past the curb. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly aware of how cold I was, how thin my uniform felt, how loudly my heart kept asking whether I had made a worse mistake by trusting a dangerous man. Dominic walked half a step behind me, never touching my back, never steering me like I was luggage. That should not have made me want to cry, but it did. His black SUV waited at the curb, engine running, windows dark as midnight. One of his men opened the rear door. I froze. Dominic noticed instantly. No, he said quietly, and the man stepped away without argument. Dominic reached into his coat, took out a clean white handkerchief, and handed it to me. For your wrist. I stared at the cloth, then at the tattoos climbing from his collar to the edge of his jaw. Why did you understand the signal? His expression did not change, but something old moved behind his eyes. My mother used it once, he said, in a grocery store in Queens, when I was 12. A stranger understood. It saved us. The rain hit his shoulders, turning his coat darker. For the first time, He looked less like a legend and more like a man carrying a wound he had polished into power. I pressed the handkerchief over my wrist. Evan stepped out of the diner behind us, his face tight with panic. Dominic did not turn around. He only opened the passenger door himself and looked at me. "You can get in," he said, "or I can call someone you trust. Your choice." That was the moment he became more dangerous to my fear than to me. I looked at the open passenger door, then at Evan standing under the diner awning with rain cutting silver lines between us. He was not shouting anymore. That scared me more than when he had smiled. Quiet men could become storms in private places. Dominic waited with one hand resting on the top of the door, his tattooed fingers still, his face unreadable beneath the harsh blue glow of the streetlight. He had given me a choice, and somehow that made choosing harder. All my life, people had decided things for me. What I should eat, what I should wear, how much space my body was allowed to take in a room. Teachers called me sweet because I stayed quiet. Strangers called me harmless because I was soft. Evan called me lucky because he had noticed me at all. I pressed Dominic's handkerchief tighter around my wrist and felt the clean cotton warm against my skin. "I have nobody to call," I whispered. The words came out smaller than I wanted. Dominic's jaw tightened, not with pity, but with something heavier. "Then tonight, you have somewhere to go," he said. "Not forever. Just until morning." I climbed into the SUV before fear could change my mind. The leather seat was warm. The air smelled faintly of cedar and rain. Dominic closed the door gently, then spoke to one of his men through the open window. "Make sure Mr. Hale understands that Miss Parker is not to be followed, called, or visited." His voice never rose. It did not need to. The man nodded once. As Dominic rounded the hood, Evan's eyes met mine through the rain. For the first time, he looked uncertain. Not because I had become stronger in that moment, but because someone powerful had finally treated my silence like evidence instead of weakness. When Dominic got behind the wheel, he did not look at me immediately. He just started the car and said, "What is your name?" I swallowed hard. "Lily Parker." His hands stilled on the wheel. "Lily," he repeated, like the name had opened a locked door inside him. For several seconds, the only sound inside the SUV was the wipers dragging rain across the windshield. Dominic stared through the glass as if Chicago had disappeared and something much older had taken its place. I sat very still, afraid that even breathing too loudly might make him regret helping me. "You knew my name," I said, though it came out more like a question. His fingers tightened once around the steering wheel. "I knew a Parker," he answered. "A woman named Grace Parker." The name struck me so hard I forgot the cold. "My mother." Dominic turned then, and under the dashboard light his face looked even harsher, the tattoo at his neck moving with the slow pull of his breath. "Your mother was the stranger in Queens," he said. My chest tightened. That was impossible. My mother had told me the story 100 times, but never with names. She said she had seen a woman in a grocery store standing too still beside a boy with dark eyes. She said the woman touched her collarbone, turned a sugar packet upside down at the coffee counter, and my mother understood. She helped them leave through the back door while nobody was looking. Dominic looked back at the road. She saved my mother from a life that had already taught her not to ask for help. I pressed my hand to my mouth, trying to hold myself together. My mother had died 2 years ago with unpaid bills on the kitchen table and a Bible beside her bed. I never knew one quiet act had followed me into this rain. "Why did you look scared when I said my name?" I asked. His answer came after a long silence. "Because your mother made me promise something when I was 12. If darkness ever finds her daughter, do not let it teach her to disappear." The SUV pulled away from Rosalie's curb, and for the first time, I wondered whether destiny had not arrived to save me, but to collect an old promise. The city blurred past my window in streaks of yellow, red, and wet asphalt. Dominic drove without music, without phone calls, without the restless arrogance I expected from a man everyone whispered about. He kept both hands on the wheel and gave silence room to breathe. That made the memories louder. My mother at our kitchen table, folding grocery bags into perfect squares. My mother touching 2 fingers to her collarbone whenever old fear crossed her face. My mother telling me that quiet women survived because they noticed what loud men missed. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Somewhere with cameras, locks, and witnesses," Dominic said. "A hotel on Michigan Avenue. You will have your own room, your own key. Nobody enters unless you open the door." The words should have comforted me, but comfort felt unfamiliar, like shoes borrowed from someone braver. I looked down at the white handkerchief around my wrist. His initials were stitched in black thread. DV, clean. Expensive. So unlike anything I owned that it almost made me angry. I do not want to disappear, I said. Dominic glanced at me once. You will not. People like you always say that. My voice shook, but I did not stop. They put women in safe rooms, change their numbers, tell them to stay quiet, then call it protection. My mother stayed quiet her whole life. She still died poor, tired, and afraid. The SUV slowed at a red light. Rain crawled down the windshield between us and the city. Dominic looked at me then, really looked, and something in his expression cracked just enough for me to see the man under the monster. You are right, he said. Protection without dignity is just another cage. I swallowed the ache in my throat. Then do not hide me. Help me stand where he can see I am not his anymore. Dominic's jaw tightened. For the first time since he entered the diner, the feared man of Chicago looked afraid of a 20-year-old girl with shaking hands. He did not take me straight to the hotel. At the next intersection, he turned north instead of east, guiding the SUV through streets that looked empty but never felt abandoned. Chicago after midnight had a way of keeping secrets in the glow of 24-hour laundromats and gas stations with buzzing lights. People stood under awnings, shoulders hunched against the rain. A bus sighed at the curb. Somewhere, a siren cried and faded into distance. I watched all of it through tinted glass and wondered how many lives were being held together by silence at that exact moment. Dominic noticed me watching. Your apartment, he said. Do you need anything from there tonight? My body went cold before my mind understood why. No. Then yes. Then I do not know. He nodded once, as if all three answers made sense. Did Mr. Hale have a key? I looked down at my lap. I never gave him one. That is not what I asked. My throat tightened. He had one made. I found it on his key ring once. He said I had probably forgotten giving it to him. Dominic's face did not change, but the air around him did. It became quiet in a way that felt almost sharp. We do not go there alone, he said. I am not going back there with you breaking down my door. He glanced at me. I do not break doors for women who have spent their lives being shoved through them. We will call the building manager. We will document the lock. We will collect what you need. Then we will leave. There was no romance in the words. No dramatic vow. No, I will destroy him. Just steps. Clear, ordinary, possible steps. For some reason, that steadied me more than a promise would have. My apartment was 6 miles away, on the 3rd floor of a brick building where the hallway always smelled like laundry soap, onions, and old heat. Dominic parked across the street instead of in front. One of his men, a broad-shouldered man named Matteo, stood under the awning while Dominic called the building manager from a number Marcy had given him off my emergency contact card at Rosalie's. I expected the manager to refuse. People refuse things when poor girls asked. But Dominic's voice had a way of making refusal sound inconvenient. 10 minutes later, Mrs. Alvarez came downstairs in a robe and rain boots, holding a ring of keys and blinking at the black SUV like it had rolled out of a crime show. Lily? She said, her eyes moving from my wet uniform to Dominic's suit to the handkerchief around my wrist. Are you okay, Mija? The word nearly undid me. I had not been called anything that soft in months. I am trying to be, I said. Dominic stayed behind me, silent. Mrs. Alvarez looked at him with suspicion sharp enough to cut bread. Good, I thought. Somebody should. He did not seem offended. He held up both hands slightly, palms visible. Miss Parker needs to check her locks and gather belongings. I will remain in the hall if that makes her more comfortable. Mrs. Alvarez looked at me. You want him there? I looked at Dominic. He looked back without moving closer. No one had ever made my choice the center of the room before. In the hall, I said, please. My apartment looked smaller than I remembered. A sagging couch, 2 mugs in the sink, a stack of textbooks beside the radiator. My mother's old blue sweater folded over the back of a chair because I still could not put it away. Everything smelled like vanilla dish soap and rain leaking through the window frame. For one breath, I almost believed I had imagined the whole night. Then I saw the flowers on the counter. White lilies wrapped in brown paper. No note. No water. Just left there like a claim. I had not bought them. Mrs. Alvarez saw my face and crossed herself. Dominic stayed at the threshold exactly where he had promised, but his eyes moved over the room with terrifying precision. When did those arrive? He asked. I do not know. They were not here this morning. Did anyone else have access? I shook my head, then stopped because the truth had teeth. Evan. Mrs. Alvarez muttered something in Spanish and reached for her phone. I took photographs with my own phone because Dominic told me to, not touching anything until I had proof. The act felt strange. Adult. Official. Not fear swallowed in private, but fear recorded in case anyone tried to call it imagination. I packed in 12 minutes. 2 changes of clothes. My school laptop. My financial aid papers. My mother's Bible. Her sweater. A framed photo from when she was still healthy enough to stand in sunlight without looking transparent. I almost left the red apron. Then I folded it into the bag too. It smelled like coffee and grease and the life I was trying to keep, not run from. Dominic did not enter until I asked him to check the window lock. Even then, he moved like the floor belonged to me. The lock was loose. Not broken exactly. Persuaded. That was the word my mind chose. Dominic looked at it for a long time. "Mr. Hale is careful," he said. That made me laugh once, humorless and shaky. That is what everyone likes about him. He is careful in public. Dominic turned to me. Careful is not the same as good. The sentence stayed with me while Mrs. Alvarez changed the deadbolt, while Mateo carried my small duffel downstairs, while Dominic waited under the flickering hallway light as if patience were a discipline he had learned the hard way. On the stairwell landing, Mrs. Alvarez took both my hands. Her palms were warm and rough. "You come back when you want, not when you are afraid," she said. "You hear me?" I nodded. My eyes burned. Dominic looked away, giving me privacy in a hallway full of peeling paint. That was the second thing I learned about him. He knew when to be feared, but he also knew when to disappear. Back in the SUV, my phone started buzzing. Once, twice, then again and again until the sound filled the car like insects. Evan. Dominic did not reach for it. He did not tell me to block him. He did not even look at the screen until I turned it toward him with shaking hands. The messages came fast. "Where are you? You are making this worse. I know you went home. Who is with you? Pick up. Lily, answer me." Then a pause. Then the one that made the blood leave my face. "You have always needed someone to tell you who you are. Without me, you are nothing." Dominic read it. His expression became unreadable. "Give me the phone," he said. My fingers tightened around it. "No." His eyes lifted to mine. "Good." I stared at him. He nodded toward the screen. "Keep it. Save everything. He does not get to turn your fear into missing evidence." I let out a breath I did not know I had trapped. No one had ever made my refusal feel like strength before. The next message arrived while we were crossing the bridge. "I can ruin you." Dominic glanced at it, then back at the road. "Can he?" I thought about Rosalie's. My school. My landlord. The way Evan knew how to sound reasonable. The way people believed men who wore clean coats and never raised their voices in front of witnesses. "I do not know," I said. "Then we find out in daylight." He turned onto Michigan Avenue, where the hotel rose in gold and glass above the rain-washed street. I had passed buildings like that my whole life without imagining I belonged inside. They were not built for girls with cracked phone screens and wet socks. The doorman opened the door before Dominic touched the handle. Warm air rushed in, smelling of polished wood, flowers, and money. I hesitated. Dominic got out first, then walked around to my side. But he did not open the door until I nodded. Such a small thing. Such a devastating thing. Consent in inches. Consent indoors. Consent in silence, waiting for permission. We reached the lobby just before 1 a.m. Glass doors opened into gold light and warm air, and suddenly I became painfully aware of my wet uniform, my cheap shoes, my round face reflected in marble polished bright enough to judge me. The lobby quieted when Dominic entered. Not because he spoke, because power walked beside him like a shadow. A woman at the front desk went pale, then smiled too quickly. "Penthouse," she asked. "2 rooms," Dominic said. "Separate floors." Under her name. I looked at him. He handed over his card without looking away from me. "Your name goes on the door, Lily. Not mine." That was when I understood the first lesson my mother had left inside that silent signal. Rescue was not being carried away. Rescue was being handed back to yourself. But safety did not arrive all at once. It came in pieces so small I almost missed them. A key card placed in my palm. An elevator ride where Dominic stood near the doors instead of beside me. A hallway with thick carpet that swallowed our footsteps. A room with a bed so wide it looked untouched by human sadness. The concierge brought tea, a toothbrush, a clean sweatshirt, and sweatpants in my size. Not smaller, not an apology, just my size. I stood in the bathroom for a long time with the door locked, staring at myself under lights that did not forgive anything. My hair had come loose from its ponytail. My cheeks were pale except for the flush left by crying I had not allowed myself to finish. My wrist held the memory of fingers, but Dominic's handkerchief covered it like a soft command to heal. I turned on the shower and sat on the closed toilet seat until steam blurred the mirror. I did not cry until I saw the little bottles of shampoo lined up by the sink. It was absurd. Not Evan. Not the flowers in my apartment. Not the messages. Shampoo. Tiny, expensive, unnecessary kindness. My mother had stretched conditioner with water the year before she died. I used to pretend not to notice. Now I sat in a hotel bathroom bigger than our old kitchen and cried so quietly my own body seemed ashamed of the sound. A knock came once. Gentle. Not on the bathroom door. The outer room. I froze. Miss Parker, a woman's voice called. My name is Dana. I work with Mr. Valenti's legal office. I am leaving my card under the door. No one is coming in. You do not have to answer. I waited until her footsteps faded before opening the bathroom door. The card lay on the carpet like a promise with a phone number. I picked it up and read the name 3 times. Dana Whitmore. Victim advocate and attorney liaison. The words sounded like a language for people who had options. My phone buzzed again from the bed. Evan had switched tactics. I am worried about you. That man is dangerous. Call me, and I will come get you. I stared at the message until the letters blurred. Then I took a screenshot. Another piece of evidence. Another little brick in a wall built from truth. Sleep did not come easily. The room was too quiet. The bed was too soft. Every time the heater clicked, I sat up, certain someone had opened the door. At 2:30, I walked to the window and looked down at the city. Chicago shone wet and restless below me. Somewhere out there, Evan was rewriting the story in his head. Somewhere beneath me, Dominic Valenti occupied another floor, dangerous enough to make the hotel staff whisper, restrained enough to leave me alone. At 3, my phone rang from an unknown number. I did not answer. A voicemail appeared. I listened with my thumb hovering over delete. Lily, it is Rosalie. Honey, Marcy told me enough. You do not have to come in tomorrow. We will cover your shift. Also, the cameras were working tonight. All of them. I saved the footage before anyone could touch it. Call me when you are ready. I sat on the edge of the bed and pressed the phone against my chest. Cameras. Witnesses. My voice not floating alone in the dark. I slept sometime after 4 with the lamp on and my mother's sweater folded beside my pillow. Morning came without thunder. Just pale gray light slipping through the curtains and the low hum of traffic below. For one dangerous second, I forgot. Then my phone buzzed and my body remembered before my mind did. This time, it was Dana. Good morning, Miss Parker. I am downstairs in a private conference room. No pressure. Mr. Valenti asked me to tell you that breakfast is available, and he will not see you unless you ask for him. I read the message twice, looking for the trap. I could not find one. I showered. I put on the soft clothes from the concierge. I brushed my hair and tied it back the way my mother used to, neat but not tight. In the mirror, my face still looked like mine, which surprised me. I had expected fear to change it into something unrecognizable. Instead, I saw a tired young woman with round cheeks, red eyes, and a mouth that had survived staying closed too long. I took the elevator alone because I wanted to know I could. My hands shook so badly I pressed them flat against my thighs. The doors opened to a quiet floor with a conference room at the end. Dana stood when she saw me. She was in her 50s, black, elegant, with silver at her temples and eyes that missed nothing without making you feel inspected. She did not hug me. I loved her for that. Lily, she said, I am Dana. Before we discuss anything, I want you to know I work for you this morning. Mr. Valenti asked me to be available, but you decide what happens next. The chair beneath me felt too expensive. The coffee in front of me smelled strong and real. Dana slid a yellow legal pad across the table. You can write instead of speak. You can stop at any time. You can ask Dominic to leave the building. You can ask him to stay nearby. You can make no decision today except breakfast. I looked at the legal pad. My name was already written at the top in my own handwriting before I realized I had picked up the pen. Lily Parker. The letters looked steadier than I felt. I asked where Dominic was. Dana did not smile, but something warmed in her face. In the hallway with 2 coffees he has not touched. He said to tell you he can wait badly, but he can wait. Against my better judgment, I almost laughed. Then the door opened a few inches, and Dominic did not enter. He stood outside, black suit fresh, hair still damp at the edges, tattoos dark against his white skin above his collar. His brutal face looked worse in daylight. more human and more dangerous at the same time. I have Rosalie's footage, he said, holding up a folder. Dana told me to give it to her, not to you. I looked at Dana. She held out her hand. Dominic gave her the folder without argument. That small obedience shifted something in me. Men like Evan treated rules as obstacles unless they made the rules themselves. Dominic, who looked like he could make the whole room bend, accepted a boundary from a woman with a legal pad. That was not softness. That was discipline. Dana reviewed the footage while I ate half a piece of toast and failed to taste it. The video showed what the diner had seen but not understood. Evan's hand under the table. My signal. Dominic's approach. Evan's expression changing when he realized control had left him. It did not show every private thing, but it showed enough. Then Dana asked about the apartment. I showed her the photos of the flowers, the window lock, the messages. She did not gasp. She did not call me brave in a way that made me feel like a wound. She simply said, "This is usable." Usable. Another brick. Another inch of daylight. By 10, a police officer arrived, not in uniform, at Dana's request. Her name was Officer Reynolds, and she had kind eyes that did not pretend kindness could fix everything. She asked if I wanted Dominic in the room. I said no at first. Then I looked through the glass wall and saw him seated outside, elbows on his knees, coffee untouched, head bowed like a man in a church he did not believe he deserved. I said, "Outside where I can see him." Dana nodded as if that was a complete and reasonable answer. The statement took 2 hours. My voice broke twice. I stopped 3 times. Once, I pressed my fingers to my collarbone without thinking. Dana saw. So did Dominic through the glass. He looked away immediately, giving me the dignity of not being studied. I told Officer Reynolds about the key, the messages, the flowers, the booth, the grip beneath the table. I did not make it dramatic. Real fear rarely sounds dramatic when you say it under fluorescent lights. It sounds small, embarrassing, repetitive. But Dana kept sliding water toward me, and Officer Reynolds kept writing, and the story became less like a fog inside my chest, and more like a path someone else could follow. When it was over, I expected relief. Instead, I felt hollow. Dominic stood as I came out. He looked at me, then at Dana, waiting for permission to speak. Dana gave a small nod. "You did well," he said. The old Lily would have apologized for crying. The new one, barely born, exhausted and shaking, said, "I know." His eyes changed. Not surprise. Respect. I carried that look with me back into the elevator. The next days did not become easy just because the worst night had ended. That was another lie stories like to tell. There was no single rescue that erased the habits of fear. I still checked the hallway through the peephole before opening my hotel room door. I still flinched when a man laughed too loudly in the lobby. I still read Evan's messages even after Dana told me not to respond, because part of me needed to know where the storm was. But now I was not reading them alone. Dana filed paperwork. Officer Reynolds followed up. Mrs. Alvarez changed the locks and gave the spare to Rosalie instead of me, because I asked her to. Rosalie moved my shifts to mornings for a while and told every cook, cashier, and waitress that if Evan stepped inside, they were to call the police first and ask questions never. Marcy cried when I came back to pick up my final paycheck for the week. I expected an apology. Instead, she placed both hands on the counter and said, "I saw more than I admitted. I am sorry." The words did not fix anything, but they mattered because she did not ask me to make them easier for her. Dominic drove me there, but stayed in the car. Through the window, I could see him speaking on the phone, face cold, tattoos visible at his wrist where his sleeve had shifted. He looked like danger dressed for a funeral. Yet when Rosalie handed me an envelope with extra cash from the staff, he did not step in. He did not pay it himself. He did not turn my life into a performance of his generosity. He just waited. When I climbed back into the SUV, I held the envelope in both hands. "They should not have done this," I said. "Perhaps they wanted to." I looked at him. "You really do not know how to be comforting, do you?" For the first time, Dominic Valeni almost smiled. "No, but I am learning not to confuse comfort with control." That sentence sat between us all the way to my campus. I had not planned to go to class. My backpack felt too heavy, my stomach too tight. But I had a psychology exam at 11, and the old fear had taken enough hours from me. Dominic parked across the street from the community college, engine idling. Students moved along the sidewalk in hoodies and jeans, holding coffee, laughing, complaining about finals as if the world were ordinary because for them it still was. I wanted to hate them. Instead, I envied them so sharply it hurt. Dominic noticed. "You do not have to prove anything today." "I am not," I said. Then why go in? Because if I miss this exam, Evan gets to be the reason. Dominic looked through the windshield at the brick building. That answer pleased him and pained him in equal measure. He reached into the back seat and picked up my backpack. He did not hand it to me until I held out my hand. Another tiny boundary. Another door opened only after I chose it. I walked into campus alone. Every step felt visible. My body felt visible. My cheeks. My thighs. My shaking hands. I heard Evan's voice in my head, telling me I looked ridiculous, telling me everyone could tell I was a mess. Then I heard my mother, softer but steadier. Quiet women notice what loud men miss. I noticed the exit signs. I noticed the security desk. I noticed 3 girls from my class waving me over like nothing about me had changed. I sat for the exam with my hands trembling. I did not ace it. I passed. Sometimes survival looked exactly like a C+. When I came out, Dominic was still across the street, leaning against the SUV with his arms folded. He had not followed me. He had not sent a man inside. He had trusted me to walk back out. That trust felt heavier than protection. I crossed at the light. "You waited," I said. "Badly," he answered. This time I did laugh. It startled both of us. The sound was small and cracked, but it was mine. Dominic looked at me as if I had done something far more dangerous than smile. Over the next week, the city began rearranging itself around truth. Evan was contacted by police. He stopped messaging after Dana sent a formal notice. Then he started again from unknown numbers, softer now, sorry now, desperate now. I saved everything. Dominic never asked to handle it privately. Once, I asked him why. We were sitting in the hotel restaurant at a corner table, my plate full of pancakes I had ordered because I had spent years pretending I wanted salads. Dominic had black coffee and a newspaper he was not reading. Why not just make him afraid? I asked. People say you can. His eyes lifted slowly. People say many things. Can you? He was quiet long enough that I regretted asking. Then he folded the newspaper and set it aside. Yes. The honesty chilled me. Then why not? Because one day you would wonder whether he stopped because you had rights or because I had power. He leaned back, face carved in shadow and morning light. I want him stopped by your voice, Lily, not by my reputation. I looked down at the syrup shining on my plate. Nobody had ever made my voice sound like something that could stand in the same room as power. You are not what people say you are, I said. Dominic's expression hardened slightly. I am exactly what people say I am. Then why help me this way? Because your mother once helped mine without asking what we deserved. His mouth tightened. And because I have spent too many years mistaking fear for order. The confession was not gentle. It did not absolve him. It simply existed between the coffee and the pancakes, uncomfortable and true. That was how Dominic told the truth. He did not decorate it. He placed it on the table and let it weigh what it weighed. That afternoon, Dana took me to a courthouse annex to file a protective order. Dominic did not come inside. I asked why as we stood outside the entrance beneath the sky finally clearing. Dana adjusted her glasses. Because this process needs to belong to you. Also because his presence can complicate things. People may focus on him instead of you. I looked back at the SUV parked half a block away. Dominic stood beside it, speaking to Mateo, all black suit and watchful silence. Even from a distance, people walked around him without knowing why. I understood then how easy it would be to hide behind him, to let his shadow become my shape. It would feel safe for a while, maybe even good. But my mother had not taught me the signal, so I could trade one form of disappearance for another. Inside, I signed papers with a pen chained to the desk. The clerk mispronounced my name. A baby cried in the hallway. A man argued about parking tickets behind us. It was not cinematic. It was fluorescent, slow, and frustrating. But when the clerk stamped the papers, the sound was louder to me than thunder. I had asked the world to put my fear on record. The world had answered with ink. That night, Dominic took me to an old church on the south side after I asked him where his mother was. He did not answer at first. Then he said, "She lights candles on Thursdays." It was Thursday. The church smelled like wax, wood, and old prayers. Dominic left his men outside. Inside, he moved differently, shoulders still broad, face still fierce, but quieter, as if the room held a version of him he did not want to disturb. His mother sat in the third pew, small and white-haired, with a scarf tied under her chin and a rosary wrapped around her fingers. When she saw me, she did not look surprised. She looked like she had been expecting my mother's daughter for years. "You have Grace's eyes," she said. I sat beside her because my knees forgot how to stand. Her name was Celia Valeni. Her hands shook when she touched my cheek. Not from fear. From age. From memory. "Your mother gave me $10, she said. $10 and a bus card. She told me to take my boy and go where the lights were bright. Dominic stood at the end of the pew, looking at the floor. I had never seen him look young until then. Celia smiled at him with a tenderness that made his brutal face seem almost defenseless. He was so serious even then. 12 years old and already trying to be a wall. I looked at Dominic. He did not look up. My mother never told me your names, I said. Celia nodded. Good. Names are heavy when people are hunting for them. No one was hunting us, Dominic said quietly. Celia's eyes sharpened. Do not lie in church, Domenico. The full name struck him like a hand on the shoulder. He went silent. Celia turned back to me. Your mother saved us from a man who believed love was ownership. Maybe that is why my son recognized the shape of your fear. Dominic's jaw tightened. I recognized the signal. Celia tapped her rosary against her palm. No, you recognize the cage. The words moved through the church like candle smoke. Dominic looked away, and I understood that redemption was not a grand transformation. Sometimes it was a man with tattoos on his throat standing in front of his mother, unable to argue with the truth. Before we left, Celia pressed something into my palm. A small silver medal on a chain, worn smooth at the edges. Grace gave me this the day we left Queens, she said. I think she meant for it to come back when the promise did. I tried to refuse. She closed my fingers over it. Let old kindness finish its circle, child. In the SUV, I held the medal until it warmed against my skin. Dominic did not ask to see it. He drove with the careful silence I was beginning to understand as respect. After several blocks, he said, My mother thinks I can still be better than I am. Mothers are unreasonable like that. Mine thought I could survive anything if I kept noticing exits. He glanced at me. She was not wrong. The city slid past, lit and wet and alive. For the first time, I felt grief and gratitude sit together without tearing me apart. The hearing happened 9 days after the diner. Evan arrived in a navy suit with his hair perfectly combed and a woman I assumed was his attorney walking beside him. He looked smaller in daylight, which frightened me in a different way. I had built him into a storm inside my head, but here he was, just a man with clean nails and practiced concern. That was what made men like him dangerous. They looked ordinary. They looked believable. Dominic was not in the room at first. Dana had advised against it. I agreed. Then I walked in and saw Evan turn toward me with that soft, wounded expression he had used so many times, and my body forgot the difference between courthouse and corner booth. My hand went to my collarbone. Dana leaned close. Do you want him nearby? I hated that I did. I hated needing anything. Then I remembered what I had told Dominic in the car. Protection without dignity was a cage. Dignity did not mean needing no one. It meant choosing who stood near you. Yes, I whispered. Dominic entered 2 minutes later and sat in the back row. He did not glare at Evan. He did not perform danger. He simply sat, hands folded, tattoos visible, face unreadable. Evan saw him and lost one shade of color. The judge asked questions. Dana presented messages, footage, the photographs from my apartment, the lock report from Mrs. Alvarez. Evan's attorney spoke about misunderstandings, emotions, a young relationship under stress. I listened to my life being softened into phrases that did not bruise anyone's hands. Then Dana asked if I wanted to speak. My stomach dropped. I stood anyway. The room seemed too bright. My voice came out thin at first. I said Evan had never needed to shout to scare me. I said he made fear sound like concern. I said the hardest part was not leaving him. It was believing I had the right to leave. Evan stared at the table. The judge listened. Dominic did not move. When I finished, the silence felt different from the one in the diner. This silence held space instead of stealing it. The order was granted. Not forever. Not magic. Paper did not stop every kind of danger. But it was something. A line drawn by law instead of by a man's mood. Outside the courtroom, Evan stepped toward me before remembering he could not. His face twisted for half a second, revealing the private man beneath the public one. Then he saw Officer Reynolds standing by the door and stopped. Dominic moved too. Just one step, then halted when I lifted my hand. Not the signal. A boundary. He obeyed it immediately. I looked at Evan and felt something loosen inside me. Not forgiveness. Not peace. Something cleaner. Distance. You do not get to tell me who I am anymore, I said. My voice did not shake. Evan looked at Dominic, as if the words must have belonged to him. That almost made me smile. They were mine. After that, time did what time does. It did not heal me quickly. It simply kept arriving. I moved back to my apartment after the locks were changed and the window repaired. The first night alone, I slept with every light on and a chair under the doorknob, even though I knew the new lock was solid. In the morning, Mrs. Alvarez knocked with tamales wrapped in foil and pretended not to notice the chair. Rosalie gave me my shifts back, but moved me off late nights until I asked for them again. The first time I worked after dark, Marcy placed an upside-down sugar packet near the register without saying a word. I saw it and had to go to the back room to breathe. Not because I was scared, because someone had learned my language. Dominic came into Rosalie's 2 weeks later at 11:15 at night. Alone. No black SUV outside, at least not visible. No men near the door. Just him in a black coat, neck tattoos half hidden by his collar, brutal face making 3 truck drivers suddenly remember their coffee. I was carrying a tray of fries to booth 4. My hands almost dropped it. He sat at the counter. Marcy raised an eyebrow at me. I ignored her badly. Coffee? I asked him. Please. His voice was the same as ever, low and controlled, but something in me had changed enough to hear the fatigue beneath it. I poured his coffee. He did not touch it. I have something for you, he said. My shoulders tightened. He noticed. Not a gift. Information. He slid a folder across the counter, then stopped it with 2 fingers before it reached me. Dana said I should ask first. Do you want to know? My heart knocked once hard against my ribs. About Evan? About your mother? The diner sounds faded. The grill. The rain beginning again outside. Marcy laughing too loudly at the register. What about her? Dominic looked down at the folder as if it contained something fragile enough to cut him. After Queens, she sent my mother one letter through a shelter address. My mother kept it. I did not know until last night. She thought you should have it. I did not open the folder in front of him. I took it home after my shift and sat at the kitchen table where my mother used to fold grocery bags. The letter was only 1 page. Her handwriting leaned to the right, rushed but careful. Celia, I hope you and your boy made it somewhere bright. I keep thinking about his eyes. Children should not have to watch doors the way we do. I have a daughter now, Lily. She is small and loud when she laughs. I pray she never learns this signal, but if she does, I pray someone answers. I pressed the paper to my chest and sobbed so hard Mrs. Alvarez knocked on the wall from next door. The next morning, I called Dominic. He answered on the second ring. Is something wrong? No. I wiped my face with my sleeve. I just wanted to tell you she used to think I laughed loudly. A pause. Then his voice softened in a way I had never heard. Do you? Not lately. Then we will consider it unfinished business. I laughed then, unexpectedly, wet and broken. He said nothing, but I heard him exhale like the sound mattered. We did not become a love story overnight. I would not let the world make my healing romantic just because the man who helped me was dangerous and beautiful in the way storms were beautiful from behind glass. Dominic did not ask me to dinner. He asked if I had eaten. He did not send roses. He sent Dana's invoice marked paid by the Valeni Foundation, then apologized when I told him that still felt too close to buying my freedom. The next day, Dana called to explain the foundation paid emergency legal costs for dozens of people every year, and my case would be handled the same way with paperwork I could review. Dominic learned. So did I. I learned that refusing help and having dignity were not always the same thing. He learned that giving help and taking control could look dangerously alike from the outside. We argued once in his office above a closed restaurant on Taylor Street. I had gone there to discuss the scholarship idea because Rosalie had told him half the women in her staff knew signals they wished someone had answered sooner. The office smelled like leather, espresso, and cold rain. Dominic stood behind a desk large enough to look like a border crossing. I hated that desk immediately. You cannot just open a fund and name it after my mother because guilt makes you generous, I said. His face went still. That is not why. Then why? Because Grace Parker saved my family when no one powerful cared to. Because women like her should not have to depend on luck. Because I have money that came from a world I am trying to make less cruel before it buries me. The honesty hit harder than charm would have. I crossed my arms. And where do I fit in? He came around the desk, then stopped several feet away, remembering space. You tell me when I am turning her name into my redemption instead of her legacy. That answer stole the argument from my mouth. I sat in the chair opposite him. It was too soft. I hated that too. She would have wanted practical things, I said after a while. Hotel rooms, lock changes, bus fare, legal help, child care for appointments. Not fancy speeches. Dominic reached for a pen. Then we make it practical. We spent 3 hours drafting ideas. Not romance. Not candlelight. Receipts. Policies. Emergency contacts. A 24-hour phone line staffed by people trained to listen. Rosalie joined by speakerphone and swore whenever the plan became too polished. Dana added legal requirements. Mrs. Alvarez offered to translate flyers into Spanish and then said she was not asking permission. By the time I left Dominic's office, my head hurt and my chest felt strangely light. At the door, he said, "Lily." I turned. "Thank you for not letting me make this about me." I looked at his brutal face, the tattoos on his neck, the hands resting open at his sides. "You are welcome." Then, because the old fear did not get every final word, I added, "You are improving." His mouth almost smiled. High praise. Do not get used to it. For a while, that was what we were. Not lovers. Not strangers. Not a girl rescued and a man redeemed in one clean cut. We were two people standing on opposite sides of a promise made by the dead, trying to honor it without letting it become another chain. He came to Rosalie's on rainy nights and sat at the counter. I refilled his coffee. Sometimes we talked. Sometimes we did not. Silence with Dominic was different from silence with Evan. Evan's silence asked me to perform. Dominic's allowed me to exist. One night, a teenage busboy named Aaron dropped a tray when Dominic walked in. Plates shattered. Everyone froze, waiting for anger because powerful men had trained the world to expect it. Dominic looked at the broken pieces, then at Aaron's terrified face. "I have broken more expensive things," he said. Marcy snorted. The diner breathed again. Aaron laughed shakily, and I watched Dominic realize in real time that mercy could change a room faster than fear. He looked at me across the counter. I lifted 2 fingers, not to my collarbone, but in a small salute. He rolled his eyes like I had offended his entire reputation. That was the night I understood the part of him I had saved was not soft. It was human. The scholarship fund opened 3 months after the diner. Grace Parker Emergency Door Fund. I hated the name at first because it sounded too poetic. Then Dana showed me the logo. A small open door with light under it. No roses. No chains. No dramatic wings. Just a door. I cried in the bathroom for 8 minutes, then came out and told everyone the font was ugly. Rosalie said grief had made me bossy. Mrs. Alvarez said finally. Dominic said nothing, but the next version had a better font. The first call came before the website was fully finished. A woman needed a room for one night and a locksmith in the morning. Then another needed a ride to court. Then a student needed emergency childcare during a meeting with an advocate. The fund was not a miracle. It was logistics. It was gas carts, hotel confirmations, legal forms, and people answering phones at 3 in the morning with voices trained not to sound shocked. It was my mother's old kindness turned into structure. It was Dominic's power learning to stand behind something instead of on top of it. Evan's case moved slowly, as real consequences often do. He did not go away in a burst of cinematic justice. He lost access first, then credibility, then the ability to charm every room before I entered it. The footage from Rosalie's mattered. The messages mattered. The apartment photos mattered. So did my statement. When he accepted a formal agreement that required counseling, distance, and documented restrictions, part of me felt cheated. I wanted the world to do something loud enough to match what fear had done inside me. Dana told me that justice often felt smaller than pain because pain had no paperwork. She was right. But the first full month without a message from him felt like breathing clean air after years in a basement. That mattered too. By spring, I had stopped looking over my shoulder every 10 seconds. I still looked, just not every 10. I passed my classes. I changed my major from general studies to social work after Dana let me shadow a community intake day. I gained 5 pounds during finals and did not apologize to the mirror. I bought a yellow dress from a thrift store because my mother once said I looked like sunlight in yellow. I wore it to the first fundraiser and almost turned around in the parking lot. Dominic was waiting near the entrance, black suit, dark tattoos, fierce face, looking like every bad decision in Chicago had arrived early. He saw me and forgot to be intimidating for half a second. "You look like your mother's letter," he said. My throat tightened. Loud when I laugh. He nodded. Bright. I looked away because some compliments were harder to survive than insults. Inside the hall, people with money drank sparkling water and tried to understand pain through speeches. I hated them a little. Then I hated myself for hating them because some of them wrote checks that became hotel rooms and locks and bus fare. Dominic stayed at the back, where shadows suited him. Dana spoke first. Rosalie spoke next and made half the room laugh, then cry. Mrs. Alvarez spoke in Spanish and English, daring anyone to misunderstand. Then it was my turn. My knees shook so badly I gripped the podium with both hands. The lights were hot. The microphone smelled faintly of metal. In the back of the room, Dominic stood still as a wall, but not one I was trapped behind. One I could lean against if I chose. I told them about a signal, not the details that belonged to survivors. Just the idea that sometimes a person asks for help in a language fear forced them to invent. I told them my mother believed someone would answer. I told them rescue should not depend on luck, beauty, money, or being loud enough to be believed. My voice shook, then steadied. I did not tell them Dominic saved me. That would have made the story too simple and too false. I told them a room full of people finally learned how to see me. Afterward, a woman in a pearl necklace cried into a napkin and wrote a check large enough to make Rosalie whisper something holy and inappropriate. A college student asked to volunteer. A retired locksmith offered free emergency changes twice a month. Dominic watched it all with an expression I could not name. Later, on the balcony outside the hall, the city wind lifted the ends of my hair. He came to stand beside me, leaving enough space for another person between us. "You did what Grace asked," he said. I looked at the lights below. "So did you?" "No." His voice was low. "I began paying a debt. You turned it into a door." I thought about the girl in the diner, touching 2 fingers to her collarbone, hoping one dangerous man understood. I thought about my mother at the kitchen table, folding grocery bags into perfect squares. I thought about Celia in the church, saying old kindness should finish its circle. "Maybe we both did," I said. Dominic looked at me then, and the city reflected in his eyes like broken glass learning how to shine. He did not touch me. He did not need to. Some moments are intimate because nothing is taken from them. Months passed. The rain came and went. Rosalie's kept the sugar packets in a little bowl near the register, and every new waitress learned that upside down meant pay attention. Not panic, not gossip. Pay attention. Marcy trained them with the seriousness of someone teaching CPR. Aaron painted the back door bright blue because he said exits should look hopeful. Mrs. Alvarez became the unofficial queen of lock changes in our neighborhood. Dana threatened to retire every Friday and returned every Monday with stronger coffee. Dominic remained Dominic. He did not become harmless. He did not become soft in the way people who feared complexity wanted dangerous men to become soft. But he became careful about where his power stood. Behind advocates. Behind doors. Behind women who said no and expected the world to survive hearing it. Sometimes he still frightened rooms by entering them. Sometimes he noticed and left early. That counted as growth, I told him. He told me I was becoming insufferable. I told him he funded the problem. The first time I laughed loudly in front of him, truly loudly, we were in Rosalie's after closing. I had slipped on a wet floor sign I had placed myself and caught the counter with both hands, dramatic as a cartoon. Dominic reached out, then stopped because I had not asked. His face was so serious, so ready for disaster, that I started laughing. Not a polite laugh, not a nervous one. A full, embarrassing, bright laugh that filled the empty diner and bounced off the windows. Marcy clapped from the kitchen. Dominic stared at me like someone had opened all the doors in a house he thought was sealed. "There she is," he said quietly. I wiped my eyes. "Who?" "The girl from the letter." My laughter softened into something that hurt and healed at the same time. I touched the silver medal at my throat. For once, the gesture was not a signal. It was memory. It was gratitude. It was proof that my hands had learned other languages. A year after the night at Rosalie's, the Grace Parker Emergency Door Fund moved from a borrowed office above the diner into a small storefront with blue trim, 2 desks, a coffee machine that never worked properly, and a front door that stayed unlocked during business hours. On the opening morning, I stood outside in that same yellow dress, holding a pair of scissors too large for my hand, while Rosalie complained about the ribbon color, and Mrs. Alvarez told a local reporter that locks were sacred and landlords were not always to be trusted. Dana stood beside the door with a clipboard, already correcting someone's paperwork. Marcy had brought a bowl of sugar packets for the reception desk, and every single one sat right side up until someone needed it not to be. Dominic stood at the edge of the sidewalk, black suit, tattooed hands folded in front of him, face still fierce enough to make strangers cross the street before realizing they were being ridiculous. But the women entering that office did not look at him first. They looked at the door. They looked at the sign with my mother's name. They looked at me. That was how I knew we had built it correctly. Power was present, but it was not the centerpiece. It was the foundation under the floor, the thing no one needed to praise to stand safely. When the ribbon fell, applause rose into the cold Chicago morning. I looked at Dominic, and he gave me the smallest nod. Not ownership, not rescue, recognition. Later, after everyone had gone inside, he remained on the sidewalk, watching a young woman step through the blue door with her shoulders hunched and her phone clutched in both hands. No one rushed her. No one touched her. Dana simply opened a chair and waited. Dominic's voice was low when he spoke. I used to think ruling a city meant people lowered their eyes when I walked in. I watched the woman sit down. I watched her breathe for what looked like the first time in hours. And now? I asked. He looked at the open door, at the lights spilling across the sidewalk, at the name Grace Parker shining on the glass. Now I think it means making sure no one has to lower their eyes to survive. I smiled then, not because the world had become gentle, but because we had carved one gentle place into it with our own shaking hands. He ruled the city with fear before that night. After me, he learned that power without kindness was only noise, and a girl the world called weak could still teach a feared man how to kneel before dignity.